Luxury sales are experiencing a downturn. Last quarter, luxury fashion's biggest players, such as LVMH, Gucci's owner Kering, Richemont, and Burberry, all reported diminishing revenues. But why?
Because I don't think the consumer is stupid. I'm sorry to use that word. I think the consumer is educated more and more. There's a desire, there's an aspiration for many reasons that are different per customer. But at one point, I do believe that there's a limit to what you can do.
Has the global demand for luxury mega brands fallen for good? Are consumers bored with overpriced simpleton designs such as hoodies and t-shirts? Have their preferences shifted away from physical goods to unique experiences?
Is luxury just the aspiration of people, what it means for them and what they feel and the status that it brings when they buy those products, and the term in itself is not what it used to be. It's not necessarily associated only with the craftsmanship and the quality of the product. It's also associated with what it represents.
The House of Christian Lacroix celebrated its 30th anniversary last year, and its CEO, Nicolas Topiol, joined me to discuss the brand's growth strategy and his plan to keep it relevant during the age of imagination. Mr. Topiol is an expert in private equity investing, and since 2002 has worked with the Fallick family to establish duty-free retail and distribution operations in Central and South America, as well as leading the acquisition of Hard Candy and Urban Decay Cosmetics. Nicolas is a luxury sector visionary. He and I have been colleagues for over 20 years, sat together on NYU's Luxury and Fashion Council, and naturally, it is my honor to have Nicolas join me as a guest on some future day. Nicolas Topiol, what a pleasure to have you joining me on some future day. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, Mark. Always good to see you.
Look, I've known you for a long time now, and you have been a pillar within the luxury sector. It's fair to say a pillar at this point, right? And I just want to get a sense from you as to what's going on right now. We're in this, I think it's a tumultuous time for luxury brands. LVMH fell short with regards to their earnings in the first half of 2024. Burberry shares plunged almost 20%. I think it was about 17% or so this summer. Sales are down in Asia and the Americas. I think both Burberry and Hugo Boss showed a 23% dip in those areas of the world. And Richemont dropped 27% in China alone. The Swatch Group showed an 11% decline in sales. So I'm trying to show a broad range of brands here. What's happening in the luxury sector right now as we're recording this episode?
Look, I think it's multiple factors, as always. Definitely geopolitical factors that are impacting I would say the worldwide, or at least in the West, the sentiment, but also in Asia, and we see it in China. We were on an unbelievable ride for quite some time. Phases, cycles, we've all gone through that. We have enough gray hair, or at least I do, to see those through. The U.S. market actually has been really interesting to me. As you know, I spent a lot of time there. And when you looked at the economy and the numbers, everything looks like we were not in a recession, that everything was going well, although it's starting to change a little bit. Interest rate went higher with inflation, but the market itself, we felt, and at least I felt, in the various categories that we've involved with, that it's been really slowing down already for at least a good year and a half. Just after 2022 was a great year. Post-COVID, wonderful year for everyone. And then 23 started to sort of second half of 23, we started feeling a softening in the demand and in the consumption. Even though I don't play with Lacroix in the very high-end pricing of luxury, like some of the brands do, that we're compared to, I saw for a while that our price point, which is more contemporary, let's say, was suffering. But now we see that it's across the board, and even bigger brands, maybe to the exception of Hermès, which is, I think for me, a brand and a company that's just on a world of its own. For many reasons, they start to see that the party is a little bit cooling. You also see one thing that I myself have a hard time to understand in terms of pure product, as we know in our business. Product is where it starts and where it stops. I mean, obviously we do marketing, we do everything around it, but if you don't have a good product that people want to buy, and you start you bring in desire in the equation, then you don't really have a business. And I feel that a lot of brands have raised their prices to a point where it's becoming, I hate to say it, but for me, it's becoming a little ridiculous. I mean, the quality of the product, the ratio of the pricing to the quality is becoming outrageous. And when you see some of the brands selling T-shirts for $1,000, or sneakers for over $1,000, or even sweatshirts for that kind of pricing, and even ready to wear for any dress for 10,000 euros, or in bags that are not worth it for that kind of price, where the same product was maybe a third or a fourth of the price only a few years ago. At one point, how much can you raise the price, right? And we know that brands have grown, and a lot of brands have grown in terms of numbers. That's why those percentages are interesting, but need to be taken with a grain of salt, because how much of that is organic growth, pure organic growth? How much of that is opening stores and expanding the retail footprint? Because we know a lot of those luxury brands have chosen to go full retail, more retail than wholesale. At Lacroix, years ago, we were more wholesale based, which is why the reason we had to go through a restructuring, and then we're running the brand under a different business model now. But how much of that also is price increase? And yes, we've had inflation, but the price increase is not from 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The price increases have started a while back. And the growth in sales comes from a combination of all of the above. And when is the limit? We know even the wealthiest, most desired product, at one point there is, at least I think, there is a limit to the price. And, and maybe we've reached some of it.
So that's interesting. It seems like you're mentioning a number of factors, but you're kind of implying that inflation is not the cause alone to the luxury sector increasing their prices exponentially. Is that just like a brand thinking that they could pull more value out from their very loyal customer base, or that there was just more, there were deeper pockets, I guess, within the luxury consumer segment? Or are they just taking advantage?
I do believe that, and I'm saying that I thought about it myself. I see there's no doubt that inflation has been around, prices have gone up,
Sure.
But at one point, let's say your cost base goes up by 5%. Do you raise your price by the equivalent of what a retail price would be of that exact cost? Or do you say, well, this is an opportunity. Everybody's raising prices. I can do a little bit more and try to gain a bit more margin. So I think there's quite a bit of that has been going on. And then for, the leading brands, I've been doing this, but what I'm saying is, yes, inflation has an impact, but I think a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with inflation. Then it creates an umbrella pricing for other brands to give some air. Right? Then the brands that might be not as known or don't spend as much money in advertising might say, well, this used to cost, let's say, 1,000 euros. Now it's costing 1,500 euros, which is, on the scale of even more of the price increases over the last few years. Maybe I can take advantage of that. And some have done it. And I've thought about it hard. And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. Because at one point, I look at the consumer and I said, is this product worth this? Because I don't think the consumer is stupid. I'm sorry to use that word. I think the consumer is educated more and more. There's a desire, there's an aspiration for many reasons that are different per customer. But at one point, I do believe that there's a limit to what you can do. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, that's my belief.
Well, I think consumer sentiment is interesting. I also think just their basic interest in what they're buying is interesting. So when you look at a brand like Balenciaga, who, is one of those brands guilty of marking up their product into that T-shirt $1,000 range, hoodies at $1,500, $2,500 range. At first, maybe they were getting the demand, but do you think the consumer has gotten to the point where they're like, what's the value that I'm getting here? And by the way, Balenciaga, I'm upset with you for taking advantage of me. You said yourself, Nicolas, that the consumer is not stupid, so they must realize the cost of goods on even like the best quality hoodie is not going to cost. They're not keystoning it. It's not $500. So the consumer must know it. Do you think that consumer is turned off by brands that have done this, like Balenciaga?
Look, I think you're. I was not implying Balenciaga, but
No,
I
I know.
think
I'm
Balenciaga.
saying
No,
Balenciaga.
no, no. I know, and I'm not implying. But I actually think that Balenciaga um, creates, meaning they've really created trends. The oversized sneakers, the hoodie, the way they go about their fashion, and the way they go about pushing boundaries. A lot of people would say, "Well, this is not the history of Balenciaga; it's completely different." But again, that's a different debate. The debate on pricing and products, I think Balenciaga is a little bit different. Uh, Put aside the issues they've had, and with image in recent years, they've really pushed the boundaries. They've created oversized jackets. I mean, and then a lot of people had followed suit. They've really moved the needle in fashion, which is again another discussion of where fashion is. So I actually have respect for the fact that they really have pushed the boundaries. They've pushed the needle. Years and years ago, when I was really starting, after we just bought Lacroix, it was really one of the brands that I did study. And you're talking 15, 20 years ago, that I was really studying was Balenciaga, because even at those days, they were very smart at how they were building their collection plan. It was a lot more traditional in the fashion at the time with the scale, but the way they were approaching the collection plans was very smart to me, and so it's a brand I've followed for a long time. It's evolved tremendously. So in the case of Balenciaga itself, I think there's a value to what they're doing. Should a consumer pay $1,000 or $800 for a T-shirt that just says Balenciaga on it? I don't believe so. I think this is a little, taking advantage. But again, who am I to judge that? I don't want to judge, because if people are willing to buy it, then it's great. But is there a limit? I think there is. So in the case of a hoodie, for example, a T-shirt, you could use the purest cotton, which they don't. Um, but it's not cashmere, it's not alpaca, or it's not something where there's a value in the material you're using. And we're all about, you start a fashion collection by fabric. I mean, that's where you start traditionally. You go and you find fabric, you find something that talks to you, and it starts. Like I've seen this with Christian, I've seen this with Sacha, and that's and our designers now. That's where they start, and then they build their ideas and the collection around that. So we're not talking about you're spending that money because you're buying something with a very exclusive fabric. It's not the case. So it's really about aspirations. And it's also about, because those brands are spending a significant amount in advertising. We shouldn't forget that. The brands and the trends are of that stature are spending a lot of money in advertising, whether it's, print, digital, influencers, celebrities, you name it. And they've been very good at it. And that's why people are going out there and it's creating a status. So it's that balance between what you're wearing, the status that it shows, and they've been playing on this for quite some time now. So is it the end of that? Maybe, the last year or so, 18 months, we've heard the word quiet luxury. That's the opposite of what we're just talking about. Is that really staying? Is that more sustainable? We'll see. It's it's just getting started. But the prices are up there also, but at least looks like you're paying for quality that doesn't exist in the other brands necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, the luxury sector has obviously gone through corrections historically, and maybe this is a correction period with several factors that are at play, and it's always this delicate balance between superior design with great commercial minds that propel these excellent houses forward. We've seen it over and over again with the best houses over the past, multiple decades. So we'll see what the CEOs of these storied houses have in mind as it relates to pulling back their creative directors a little bit, and then getting a little bit more realistic with regards to price points. And while they have to preserve that profit margin, but your brand, Christian Lacroix, is really an incredible brand, and it's got an amazing history. The founder, Christian Lacroix, the individual, is a French-born designer born in Arles. And I know that early on he was inspired. I think he told his father asked him, what does he want to do with his career? And I believe he said that he wants to be Christian Dior. Tell us a little bit about how this company came to be.
The company came to be, was created in 1987, and the first runway, haute couture runway. And I don't know if you want me to go into a little bit of the explanation of what haute couture means,
Yeah.
or actually meant at the time, because it's a little different now. haute couture is a trade that's supervised under the Ministry of Industry in France, or at least it was then. I haven't done haute couture since 2009, so maybe I'm old in the way it's run now. But at the time, it was a trade, and it was an appellation, as we say in French, which is basically a stamp. You could call yourself a couture house if you were approved by the Ministry of Industry, and that dated back to the 50s roughly. And basically had a number of rules where you needed to have two atelier or workshop. Workshop doesn't give a perfect translation, but it's an atelier, and you need to have one which was tailored for tailored clothing. One was more for flou, which is more dresses, less structured, and you needed to have those ateliers be based in Paris. You needed to have a certain amount of seamstress and seamstresses in those ateliers, and you were making one of a kind, made to measure, made by hand dresses or suits or products. So that's really what a couture was. So at the time, Christian, which actually didn't go to fashion school, he went to the L'École du Louvre, which is a museum school, to become a curator or to work in the museum industry, and that's really his passion, you can tell. And he started showing some sketches because he's a very talented designer, and ended up working at Hermès for a few years, and then was hired by Jean Patou, which was a famed couture house at the time. Mostly known today, it's been revived, but it's very well known for its fragrances. And that was in the early 1980s, went on to win 2 d'Or, which is the equivalent of the recognition of the best designer in couture of that year. And that's when Bernard Arnault, when he became famous, and Bernard Arnault, which had in his portfolio at the time, LVMH didn't exist, Dior. He had acquired Dior because Dior was part of a big French textile group called Boussac. And Bernard Arnault had acquired Boussac, and Dior was in there, and he saw that's, what was the premise of what we know today, which is incredible success story, an incredible company that has been built by him. And then he saw Lacroix, and he poached him from Jean Patou, and basically gave him the financing and the ability to open his own couture house. So that was in 1987. July 26 was the first runway. And this company ran, I would say, the traditional way at that point, except Christian was everything but traditional. And so from doing couture, you usually go and move into high-end ready-to-wear, which he did. It was a collection called Luxury, which was launched in 1988 or 1989, I believe. Then morphed into a more normal first-line designer ready-to-wear line. And in the mid-1990s was another ready-to-wear line called Bazar, which is Bazar de Christian Lacroix, which we use from time to time still, that brand, which was very successful. Sasha Walkoff, who's our creative director, which has been with the company since 1992, and has helped us, be still a great company that we are today. He's a super talented designer. And so he was the studio manager for that line. Then they went into creating a third line, which is probably not a very good idea, called Jeans de Christian Lacroix. And this one they gave as a license. And the licensee basically was copying Bazar. And so when we came to the picture in 2005, when we acquired the business from LVMH, when I say we, I work with a family that's based in the US, the Fairlick family, and their main business is in travel retail. And we had bought a few other brands from LVMH before, cosmetic brands, one called Hard Candy and then one called Urban Decay, that we helped restructure. We restructured. Urban Decay now is part of L'Oréal. And anyway, when Lacroix came, we thought it was an amazing opportunity. I was actually very surprised that LVMH would be parting with that brand because that was the only brand that ever started. And for the story, when I was in college in France, I did my thesis in 4th year before graduating in the world of haute couture in France. So I had a little bit of history, and that was 1987 I graduated, which is the year Lacroix was started. So it's funny how life brings you coincidences. And through finance, I came back into fashion. So
it's kind of interesting if you go back in time a little bit to the 80s, though, like when Arnault bought or financed the inception of Lacroix, his designs, his style were really reflective of the abundance of the 80s, right? Really bold color patterns that he created, big voluminous dresses, like really, really in your face kind of designs that were really symbolic of the 80s. And I wonder, I'm
Right.
just thinking back to the conversation we had a minute ago about consumer sentiment. It doesn't seem like this hallmark design evolved over time, right? And I wonder if the consumer, to a certain extent, post 80s said, you know what, those bold expressions are not for me anymore. And I say this with respect to Lacroix, because obviously there's a very strong place within all of society for those types of designs, even today. However, I wonder if that initial success, really just never evolved enough to keep that customer in place with the company to create a profitable business model. I know, for example, that the business model really struggled with finances for years leading up to the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. But it kind of like catapulted out after Arnault financed it. The designs were really strong. I think it was reflective of what was happening in society. But then at some point, it just started to slow down a lot. Do you think that had something to do with the lack of evolution of prints and design?
No, I don't think so, actually. I think Lacroix really came onto the scene when he was working at Patou. So, he was known, still known. The brand is still very much a print-driven brand, and we can go to that maybe later in the conversation. But his iconic design with the poof dress and all that really was started at Patou, and then he brought this into Lacroix. But remember, at the time, there's also a very strong movement in the sort of second half of the 80s of Japanese brands really bursting to the scene and coming with very monochrome, very black and very monochrome designs. So yes, the 80s were very strong, but then you had this movement and this moment in fashion where it was very quiet. And then Christian came back with Lacroix with his first runway, bringing a lot of colors. But when you see the runway of 87 was more about imprinting his style, bringing the mix of the south of France and Paris and all the mixes that he had in his life to the runway. And that's what people really liked because it brought joy. It brought a ray of sunshine. It was all about the sun. It was all about the south of France. It was all about the cross of his name. It was all about all those elements the first few years of his couture career. And I think is something where he created something new, even though he had started it at Patou, and that's what people really aspire to. But usually when you have companies like this, and you see it with other couture companies, and some are still doing couture today, quite a bit of them, then you move into ready-to-wear, then you move into accessories, and fragrance becomes a big piece. So you take Gaultier, for example, as a comparison, maybe a little bit older than Christian in terms of when they started becoming, but not much. His fragrance business is what kept him alive. And, and Hermes invested in Gaultier, and he also had, an understanding because he created his own brand with a partner, and then they went through the financial world. They needed money, they raised money, they started getting diluted. All that process when you and I know this is a normal process. When you have a venture and you want to raise money, the next word is valuation and dilution and all this. Christian never went through that because Bernard Arnault came, knocked on his door, poached him out of Jean Patou, created the company, funded the company, with no limits, from what I understand, or little limits. So he never went through this exercise of doing it out of his garage, let's say, sort of the expression, and then raising the money, having to account to other people and all this. So I think there's a disconnect between the value of the brand and the world and Christian, the work of Christian, which was fantastic, and its finances. And I think it's not necessarily linked to the product. Obviously, it is to a certain extent. But there's also the way the company was created, which is very unusual in the world of fashion. I don't know many other stories like this. I mean, maybe you do, but I don't.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I read that his first infusion of capital was in excess of $10 million. And then from there, it was, in fact, unlimited, but he also had the benefit, I would imagine, of the back end infrastructure of Arnaud's business. I think at the time you said that he had already owned Christian Dior. It was not LVMH yet as we know it today, but there must have been some back end benefits that Lacroix was able to take advantage of at that point in time too. Was it fully vertical essentially at that point?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I don't know how it was in 1987. It was a couture house, so that's more limited in terms of infrastructure. When you go into ready to wear is really when the infrastructure becomes, and accessories and all this becomes more important. And all I know is when we took over the company almost 20 years ago, or 19 years ago, Lacroix was the most integrated company in the central services LVMH, because basically I think they started those central services with Lacroix because it was the first one. Dior was always separate. Dior was always separate, and for a long time, I don't know how it is now, but it was always sort of on its own. And Lacroix was very integrated, and then they brought Kenzo and all the other brands, and that's how we grow. And then the central services were put in place. So maybe a few years after that, when we bought it, I had to rebuild a whole infrastructure, which I had done also for Hard Candy and Decay. It was the same story. And then you have to rebuild basically the whole backbone of the business, from the ERP, all the teams, production, everything, logistics, everything. Because you essentially buy the brand and the front end of the business, the design, the sales, marketing, and all of that. So Lacroix, I think, to finish answering your question on numbers, yes, it's known that Lacroix never turned a profit. And I'm not bragging about this, but I'm the first one who actually turned a profit with that company, and it took a while. We make money, and we've made money for a while now, but it has to do with many different aspects of the business, the designer included, and I think at the core, because I really asked myself that question many times, as you can imagine, was the fact that the way it was started, it was almost too easy, and business, I know business, that business is great when it's easy, but it's rare. And you have to work for it. You have to fight. You have to fight for it. You have to grind. You have good days, bad days. You lose, you win. In this case, everything was there, and it was like open gates. And I think that's a disservice to the structure of the business, where to create an imprint in the organization of the business. Again, it's my interpretation. I only take credit. I don't take. It's not from inside knowledge. It's just the way I've been with the brand for a long time. Spoke to a lot of people, and. But at the same time, we're still alive. So the work of Christian, the creations, the world, the money that was invested, the creations, his couture, is also a reason why we're still alive today. And I give him credit for that. I never forget that. And I have a lot of respect for Christian.
And you had to make some tough decisions around that 2009 time period, too. I know that you brought this company through a very, very high-profile bankruptcy to get this company back on track. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like considering bringing this company into bankruptcy? It's a very different experience with France, and that's to me, it's always been a fascinating story. Can you walk everybody through that experience a little bit, please?
It was very difficult 6 months of my life. But when you go through very difficult time, that's when you learn a lot about yourself and your capabilities. And I was, surrounded by, I have to say here, it might be awkward, but I have to say I really was surrounded by my family and my wife, and she really helped me through this emotionally, because it was really hard. I felt I had the whole world against me.
You did.
I did. And fortunately, I had a really great trustee that was very helpful as well. Unfortunately, he passed away since. So I got lucky there. So basically what happened was 2008 happens, as we all, or some of us remember, the younger generation probably not. And Lacroix was very much a wholesale-based business. We only had a few owned store, and we had some franchise, different parts of the world. I guess the biggest group was in the Middle East with Inji Chaloub and the Chaloub group, which were amazing. And but we were a wholesale business, basically. Even if you have franchise, you're a wholesale operator, right? And the crisis happens, and already we're in the middle of trying to turn around this business, which was losing money, so we're still losing money. I had a plan when we bought it. I thought it was the budget to hopefully turn it around was X, and was pretty much on target. Not exactly the way I thought it would happen, but we had no choice. I mean, at one point, customers, the department store didn't come to buy for the season after. some of our customers, and not a small number of them, didn't come up to pick up their order for that season. So we were left with a business that was bleeding already, and I thought this is going to get really ugly, and so we sort of wondered how we could turn it around, and we had some ideas, and at one point we saw no other opportunity. I mean, no other, I would say, scenario than to take the company through bankruptcy, try to bring in a different business model, and and hope for our ability to keep the company, because usually when you take a company through bankruptcy, you lose it. But I had seen that in 2008, actually just that year, there were some changes in the bankruptcy laws in France. So even though I told my shareholders that there's a big chance we will be losing the business, there was a hope that we could actually keep it because of that particular change in the law. But again, it's a court process, as well as I do, that when you go to court and when you go through a process like this, who knows what can happen. So we did file for bankruptcy in May of 2009. We had our opening, I would say, hearing in front of 3 judges early June 2009, and that was, when I did that, it was like surreal to do that. It was so hard. And then that hearing was, the judges asked me a question. They said, everybody knows that this business has never turned a profit. Why should we give you a chance to restructure it? Why should we just send it to liquidation? So fortunately, I came prepared. And, as a good Wharton boy, I had brought my slides and my business plan and all of that. And I managed to convince them to give us 6 months, but under certain conditions, because they didn't want to carry the whole business for 6 months. And they gave us the 6 months. And then those 6 months were a whole saga, because we had offers from a sheikh in the UAE that said he wanted to buy the business, never came up with the money, offered us, at one point said, we can pay you in opals. I mean, I should write a book. A lot of people tell me I should write a book about this.
What do you mean pay in opals? Like the stone?
Yes, the stone.
You had a sheikh in the United Arab Emirates offer to buy Christian Lacroix with stones.
Yeah, the Sheikh of Ajman, which I had never heard of that emirate, but it's part of the UAE. And
okay,
he came in with a €100 million offer, made a deal with Christian. We made a deal with him. It was all great. I was super happy. I said, this is amazing.
It was on paper.
It was all on paper. All went through court. I mean, it's court. It's court. You have to put your offers in black and white. It's not. It's public. It's all public. And then never came up with the money. I had another group that wanted to do a deal with us to do a license. And I told them for haute couture and keep all the employees and everything. I said, fantastic. You have it for 0, but I want a guarantee, because in France, if he fails, then I have to take everybody back. So I said to him, you have to give me a bank guarantee of such amount of money in case this way I'm covered in case you fail, because I have to take everybody back. And so he gave me a guarantee. Turned out that was a fake guarantee from a bank on the bank letterhead, but fake. I mean, you name it, I had stories left and right. At the end of the day, it was wild, but very, very intense moment for me. Very difficult because, as I said, I became persona non grata in France in terms of fashion. I was the devil. I terminated a contract with Christian. For 10 years, we didn't speak. We do speak now, which I'm very happy about. And we managed to keep the business. And we transformed the business model dramatically. We went from being about 140 people to 12. Which in France is not something easy to do, because the criteria for them to let you keep your companies are the opposite of what you have in the US. The number 1 criteria is how many people do you keep. Number 2 criteria is how many activities of your original activities do you keep. And number 3, and far behind, is how much debt do you repay?
Who determines that when you talk about that kind of upside down approach in France? Who makes that decision? Is it the 3 judges that you mentioned? Are those the ones who, but the judges have experience in the fashion industry?
Not necessarily. The court, it's interesting. It's an interesting court in France. It's a commerce court. And the judges that sit on the commerce court are actually business people like you and I. And they take a training and become judges in the commerce court, which the idea is, they're fully vested with the power of the law, and they're judges, but they also have a business or work in a business. And they do this on a part-time basis. And the idea is that because they understand business, because they understand, conflicts or whatever it is, they'll have a better understanding, and it will bring better outcomes, let's say, or more equal outcomes in conflict lawsuits and bankruptcy procedures. So the budget just were people that were business people, and then they assign a fourth one that basically runs the process while you're reorganizing. So that's the way it goes in France.
But why would these business-minded people, these business-minded judges, make a recommendation that Lacroix has to stay very heavy with regards to staff if they know that cash flow is problematic?
Because that's the law. Those are the criteria that they judge the relevance of your plan under. So basically, we said we want to close haute couture. We want to close ready to wear, because those were the two areas. Ready to wear mainly were the two areas where we're bleeding the most. Couture, actually, I had offered Christian, actually, to say, can we keep couture and then let me run the rest of the business the way I'm running it now? He didn't want to hear it, it's just a shame, because that was feasible. So we had to stop couture, because I can't imagine to do couture.
Because you're mitigating financial risk on the couture side, right?
Exactly,
you're getting the orders and building against orders.
Exactly. And I knew exactly what couture was costing me, and we could live with that. As opposed to ready to wear, because the infrastructure is much heavier, and that's where you need to do a minimum of sales, to break even. So I'd offered, let's do the couture, do what you like to do, and then we'll run the rest the way I'm running it now on the licensing platform. He didn't want to do that, which is unfortunate. So I had no choice, and so I said, okay, we'll cut couture, we'll stop working with Christian, we'll cut ready to wear, and we'll focus on building a licensing portfolio. So in France, this is like I'm the devil. And how dare I tell Christian that I don't want to work with him anymore? And so that was a tough time, but we managed to, and that's the criteria that the judges have to go through. So I met basically nobody else was better than me, and I met all the criteria. So we paid all the debts, but yes, we went against the first two criteria, because those two criteria are ridiculous. They're basically they're trying to force you to keep the reason why you went bankrupt in the first place, or some of the reasons, right? So it makes no sense. But, this is France. Again, it might have evolved since, because this was a long time ago. But unfortunately, I don't have to go through that again. Now I'm more looking at other opportunities of companies that are going through that to see if there's an opportunity to buy brands. And we looked at a few things. But that's what I did. So comes the end of December 1st, 2009, I'll remember that day. I was in court, and they granted us our plan, which is full restructuring, and I was going to rebuild the brand from scratch, pretty much, under a licensing portfolio.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You mentioned earlier that you are the first person to bring this brand into a profitable business model, and you're talking about essentially trading on Christian Lacroix's intellectual property. You keep talking about licensing. I would imagine that includes several IP plays, whether it's licensing, co-branding, direct to retail, international expansion, and beyond. Today, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you have over 1,000 points of distribution worldwide, with 60 still in France, and you're in the apparel business, you're in the accessories business. I saw you have some beautiful jewelry. You're doing collaborations. Home seems very, very strong. It really takes to these bold, traditional Lacroix designs. So what is the current business model now? How did you take this company from, what looked like more of a vertical play into a profitable intellectual property trading type of business model?
So licensing is a dirty word in France. I mean, not as much as it used to be then.
So you're the devil, and you're performing some dirty stuff over there in France.
Exactly. I'm really persona non grata. I can tell you that, but it's fine, because I'm happy in behind the scenes, and I'm happy doing my business and not being bothered, and I don't really care what other people really think about it, because what I care about is the brand. What I do is I work obviously for my shareholders, but I also work for the brand. The brand has been around since 1987, as we said. So it's been a while, 36 years. And I want the brand to outlive me, obviously. I want the brand to be around 36 years from now. And
Yeah,
so
I love that.
that's what gets me going every day.
So is 100% of the Lacroix business licensed today?
It is 100%.
So what kind of risks come with that, though, Nick? Like, don't you you talk about caring about preserving the integrity of the brand and
Right.
having it in a place where it will go for, it will continue on for generations. But are there risks with regards to hurting the brand's
Yes, of
intellectual
course.
property when you have third-party players involved?
Of course, there's a risk. But that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, and I'll explain how we go about doing it. And I'm proudly saying, and in the American market, we are present, and we actually have about 4,000 points of sale around the world now. And
Oh, wow.
in the US, for example, you can find our products all the way from Neiman Marcus to TJX, and I'm very proud of that because my goal is, and we can come back to pricing. I mean, we'll go for a circle on pricing afterwards, but my goal is really to hopefully put our products, good quality products, in the hands of many and different. I like I like the way I've approached, and I'll go to the process. I've approached this licensing model in terms of risk is financial risk. Is I wanted to build like a department store. When you walk into a department store, the way a department store, was built, you have the ground floor, usually fragrance, cosmetics, accessories. So you need a fragrance, you'll go to the ground floor. You get married, you want to register a waiting list, or you want to go and buy a gift for a wedding, you'll go to a different floor. You need this menswear, you'll go to a different floor. Women's wear, designer, contemporary, you go to different floors. So I wanted to go and be able to touch people in every moment, or at least a lot of moments in their lives. That was sort of the general idea. Plus, as I said, I have a financial background, so I felt, to the extent that it's obviously controllable, the more licensees or categories or territories I have, the more balanced my portfolio is. Not everything is going to work well at the same time. Not everything is going to work badly at the same, like a stock portfolio. And I'm hoping, everything together with that diversification of products, partners, and territories will give me more stability in my financial, in the financials of the company. And it's proven overall to be pretty right, except for really moments in, which are, uncontrollable, I would say, geopolitics or market crashes or things like that, which affect everybody. And then the other thing that I wanted to do, and I asked, first thing I did is I asked Sasha if he could stay with me and become the creative director, which, it was Christian's right-hand person. It was, for me, the natural choice and an obvious choice, but not necessarily obvious for him. But he took up the challenge, and I told him, listen, what I think we should do, and we were talking about it, and we agreed, was we will focus on menswear, because we did have a license at the time. So let's bring this up. Nobody knew about it, but it was doing really well. And then we'll also move into home, which is something we had dabbled into a little bit with Christian, and then I saw how he did his hotels, and I thought, there's something there. The world of Lacroix, the way people talked about it, I thought makes sense to do this in home, because this is a much bigger scale. Yeah. So that was the idea. And then the other thing was I wanted to really, I had seen that on the few licenses that we had at the time were doing really well. So why was that doing well? And the rest of our business was not. And I realized it was quite simple, actually, because when you mixed what we were really good at, and we're still hopefully very good at, which is creativity, I believe we're extremely good at that. And you mix that with the best in class that focuses on one product, let's say menswear in this case, and on certain territories, and they do this day in, day out, day in, day out. They know what price sells, what needs to be in the market, how to produce it, how to distribute it, relationship with retailers or distributors or whatnot. And then they're experts. Obviously, you need to find the right companies. They're expert in their field. You bring those two together, one and one has to be more than two. And that's what happened. So I had sort of seen that, and I said, if we can bring this to a bigger scale, should be a positive development. But I wanted to do licensing. For me, there are two types of licensing, and you've heard me say that in some of your classes. One is what I call the IP licensing, which is a lot more what you see, I wouldn't say the US, but in parts of the world where basically the brands are just saying, here it is. Just what I care about is to make as much money as I can. I don't really care what you do with the bread. Okay, fine, it's a choice. And then you have what I call the operational licensing, which is what we do, where I care what happens to the brand. I want to, maybe I won't make as much money as I could. I won't monetize to an extreme, but at the same time, I want to create a legacy for the brand and keep it. And the way we do that is we basically continue to work. If you were here, you'd see the way we work. We have a studio, we have Sacha, we draw by hands, we create original prints, we don't buy prints. We create at least 30 to 40 prints every year. Not a lot of houses do that do the type of business or type of business model that we do. They usually go out there and buy prints. We don't. We create everything original. That has a cost. That has, an organization behind it. But the benefit for me is that we can be sold at Neiman Marcus. Even though we don't produce any of this, it's our licensee that does that. So that's the way we go about doing it. And I think that's how the brand is still relevant today. It has evolved, but it still feels Lacroix. But I can tell you what Sacha does is very different than what Christian would have done. But it still feels Lacroix. And some of our best-selling prints today are prints that have been created after the bankruptcy and not before.
That's very interesting. Is home the strongest category commercially for the company now?
No, it's pretty equal actually. Home is what's the most visible today, because even though I do a little bit of apparel with a second line that I've created during COVID, in the main line, I still haven't relaunched apparel and it goes back to the ability, not the ability, that I want to create and control the brand. It's hard to find the right partner. And I thought I did. I had a really interesting program set up just before COVID. We did some super interesting collabs with young brands, one from China.
Yeah, I remember you did.
Remember that? One from the UK, one from Hong Kong, and one from Denmark. Yeah. It was really amazing for me. I wanted to see how young brands would interpret our brand. I was also interested in being on their socials and seeing how they did that. And they were very excited to get the light and to be able to poke our archives. And it was great. And unfortunately, the last presentation we did with Rixo in England, it was in February during London Fashion Week in February 2020, and 3 weeks later, everything was closed. So that whole plan, which was going to come to light after that, was basically shut down. And last year, I almost signed another license for apparel, and the market conditions were so difficult that we decided not to.
Where's the demand for the brand strongest? What part of the world is really embracing the brand these days?
France still is strong place, and France is still a very good market. Used to be much bigger, and that was part of my goals, was to diminish the weight of France in our revenues. In the rest of UK, obviously all the countries around France, Germany, Northern Europe, very strong now, mostly thanks to home. And then the UK always been strong, in the US very strong, South America as well. We have a relationship with a great department store there, and that's doing really nicely. And I would say over time, Asia is where it's lost a little bit of not focus, presence for a number of reasons. But this is definitely a place where we're refocusing the energy now, because that's where we could have tremendous growth.
Nicolas, you spoke to this idea of having a multi-tiered distribution strategy. You highlighted Neiman Marcus at the luxury end, all the way down to TJ Maxx at the bottom, or TJX, I guess it's called today. Do you have a branded hierarchy set up as well, so that within each channel they're given a different piece of the Christian Lacroix brand portfolio?
Yes, I do. So the main line is Christian Lacroix, and then we do have a second line that I started actually for the US market, for a very specific handbag license in the US. When I met the company HQ, they wanted to bring the brands to the off-price market. I said, that's great, but I don't want to do that with Lacroix. So I said, but I'll create a line, a different brand, and which is called CXL by Christian Lacroix. Nothing new. A lot of brands have second lines. I mean, a diffusion line. I didn't invent anything. And I said, let's start and let's see how it goes. And it did really well. and I was using that brand more on a spot basis. I didn't have a full strategy behind it. And then COVID hit. And I thought, this is something I need to bring to the table. So I did a brand book around that brand. I revised the style guide to, to use the logo a little bit differently because I had heard what issues they had with the logo. So I made it more flexible or more easier to use. And then I signed 10 licenses within a month. And the idea was that this brand was the one which would go to this type of distribution. But what I did also, and you'll appreciate that, which I don't think many houses have done, is I have the exact same team working on both. From the studio, I asked Sasha to give us trends. I have the studio working on it, creating prints. I have the brand managers creating, following with the licensees. I have the exact same people, and I have a great team, and it's a small team working on both, which was very hard for them. Imagine going from working on Lacroix and then working for a second line, which is CXL. But it's the same. It's the same people. And why did I do that? I did that because I wanted consistency. I wanted everybody to know exactly what was going on everywhere. I didn't want two teams trying to fight against each other, which happens a lot in those type of situations. And, the team took a while to embrace it. And I have to say, but they have fully embraced it now. It's completely part of our culture. And I think that's what made CXL very successful and without endangering and touching the main line.
So this concept falls under the purview of creative control, approval rights, as it relates to deal formation, and really,
contracts.
again, going back to what you said earlier, preserving the integrity of the brand. It's just another layer of control that you're able to offer. But it's interesting, let's face it, luxury consumers are shopping for luxury brands at off-price retailers like TJX today. I mean, I would imagine that in certain instances, you're probably generating more revenue from the off-price retailers than you are, all the way up at the Neiman Marcus level. I'll leave that to you. You don't have to disclose that information today. But, luxury brands are ubiquitous. I see it like in the fragrance industry forever. The fragrance industry, brands like Prada and Burberry and some of the bigger luxury houses, they know that their actual product is being diverted back into the masses for distribution. It's a part of that profit margin and that revenue that they're not going to let go, especially for these publicly traded companies. They would lose a ton of money. So in a way, maybe the definition of luxury has changed. Like aren't luxury brands ubiquitous today? Are they to a certain extent mass brands just at a higher price point?
Very good question, because really the question is, what is luxury today? I will start with what I said. And again, maybe even a lot of people are not going to like what I'm saying, but that's okay. I'm used to that. Besides Hermes, and again, even Hermes has grown tremendously. So, and I'm saying this with the utmost respect. Louis Vuitton surpassed 20 billion euros in sales. To generate that kind of revenue is with one brand, which is considered a luxury brand, is incredible. So is that luxury or is that mass? What they've been able to do with this brand, I think is phenomenal, because the impression or the feeling of the consumer is they're buying a luxury brand, but is it really a luxury brand? I'm sure Bernard Arnault is not going to like what I'm saying, but I can see now that they're taking that brand and they're moving it up, but they're doing it super smartly between their core products with the LV and the canvas bags, all the way up to jewelry and fragrance and watches. And, I also think that Virgil did this brand, an incredible turnaround and elevated the brand in a different direction, which made it even more desirable than it was before. So it's an interesting. So I think you have this mix now between the brand, the culture, the music, the influencers, the celebrities. There's so much going on in that world that the pure definition of exclusivity, of craftsmanship, of what luxury was meant to be, of couture, which still exists, and a handful of houses. Very little in France are doing it the way it's supposed to be done in France, and what I explained earlier. This is only for a very small group. The rest has become another definition. Should it be called luxury? Is it luxury? Is luxury just the aspiration of people, what it means for them, and what they feel, and the status that it brings when they buy those products, and they can show them when they go out and to dinners or whoever, to the office or parties or whatever it is. So I think the term itself is not what it used to be. It's not necessarily associated only with the craftsmanship and the quality of the product. It's also associated with what it represents. And that's a big difference. And that's where I think you can go into a situation that we talked earlier about pricing, where is the limit? Is the market slowing down in luxury because you've reached a high price? On the complete other side of the scale, in my second line, my CXL, when I have products that are in off-price channels, I tell my licensees, I'm okay with the lower price, but I'm not okay with a bad product. I want this product to be the best product. If not, I'm not interested. But if you give the customer a great quality product at a great price, then you'll have brand loyalty. If you give great price and a shitty product, then you won't. That's the way I see it. And I can tell you, we've done programs with mass retailers in France with CXL 10 years ago already, with bed linens, and I still sleep in them every night, 10 years later, because they're good quality products. And that's what matters. So I think that's where, at one point, are we going through this sort of world of celebrities and influence and all of that, and it becomes the main driver why people would want that product? Is that what matters? Or is it the quality of the product that matters? I'm not the one to answer that. The consumer is the one to answer that.
It's kind of interesting because that puts young designers also into a precarious situation where they're following the money. At the end of the day, it's a business, like you've been saying throughout this entire discussion, and they're following the money. So even the 2019 CFDA winner of the best women's wear designer, Brandon Maxwell, this week collaborated with Walmart during Fashion Week here in New York City. It's like, I don't know if you've heard about that, but it says a lot. Like, emerging talent and emerging brands are just not going to be able to break through the moat that luxury houses with deep pockets, brands like yours that have just a ton of equity and value to them, they're not going to be able to break through and compete. It's just a fact. Right?
It is. And I realized that a long time ago. So I'm not trying to be something we're not. And I realized that. And for me, the best way to express who we are and to do the best we can is through creativity and beautiful products. And hopefully, and I think we do that. Beautiful imagery. Imagery is very important. So one of the things we do also is the quality of our production, which we also do, obviously, with outside talent, but with internally in terms of production, we do that ourselves. And Sasha, creates all of that. And imagery is really important. And I can send you some of that. You'll see, or you can see it on our website. But that's really important. And yes, I think it's difficult. I think some talents, we've seen some new talents emerge over the past 10 years. And I mentioned Virgil Abloh before because I believe he was really a Renaissance man. He was just incredible, embodied, and that's why he had the success that he had. And it's so sad that he's not with us anymore. But his trajectory and what he's done is remarkable because he really created new areas in the world of fashion which have become acceptable, and did it with with having a really great pulse. And he merged celebrities, music, art, everything together in a really interesting way. And I think that's the world we're in now, because everything is about visuals, about communication, and social media. And I think you have to take that into account. And for us, we can't compete against the people still compare us to the major brand of this world. And I love that, but we're not that. And we are in terms of legacy, in terms of quality of work, but not in terms of advertising budget. There's no way we can compete against those people. So, young designers today, I think there's a lot of talent out there, and hopefully they'll be able to come to life, and some have. And then we saw the announcement today with Sarah Burton. I mean, she's great. And it's really interesting to me to think, how did somebody who had a very specific vision for a specific brand as a designer goes to another brand, what are they going to do there? I mean, we've seen great success with ID, with Slimane, but he's bringing his touch, and it's the same touch from one brand to the next, but it seems to work. So it's really interesting to see that.
Yeah, let's just go back for those people who don't know. Sarah Burton was the longtime creative director for Alexander McQueen. I think, in fact, she stepped in after Lee passed away, and now LVMH has appointed her to the Givenchy house. And I'm curious. There's like this trend, though, like. It's almost like you could balance the promise and the product. Like, which is more important, superior product design or the communication campaigns? And if a woman like Sarah Burton was unable to maintain and sustain McQueen's revenue, what is she going to do at Givenchy? Why is there like this rotation of what these individuals who are positioned as like the best creative directors on the planet? It seems like they go from house to house, from Gucci to Valentino, and Tom Ford just had this turnover with Haider Ackerman stepping in now and all. Like, why are the same creative directors moving around this Ferris wheel of sorts?
Very good question. Okay, I think we had, trying to think, it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, was a designer-led world. Everything, you remember, advertising was this brand by this designer, this brand by this designer. And I remember having a lot of thoughts about that because, I'm still running a fashion and lifestyle house and a very renowned name. And I was thought, is that something we should be doing? And I never really believed in that. But we do, Sasha is our creative director in editorials and press. It's always is put up, in the front. But would I put Sasha's name on Christian Lacroix Maison by Sasha Walkoff on an advertising? No, I wouldn't do that because, this is the brand and this is the designer. Those are two separate things. But it was the case. Remember, it was the fashion to do that a while back. And then it sort of disappeared and then the wheel turned and it became more, especially in the big groups, obviously. I'm not talking about emerging brands of hopefully, which is a good thing of designers starting their own brands. And I just spoke to one last week, and his approach is really, I think, very interesting, and hopefully it works. And he will go out and raise money. So he's trying to do it on his own, and now it seems that it's more of a management-driven situation. So that the designer is not, and maybe again, that's my feeling, and I'm not working at LVMH or Kering on any of those big houses. That's the feeling I get from the outside. So you think that you can pluck a designer from one place and put it in another place. I mean, it's like everything in life. Sometimes in a very limited fashion it will work. And I mentioned, Eddie Seaman from Dior, and then Saint Laurent, Dior, and then Celine, and he seems to be doing very well everywhere he touches. But then Givenchy, for that matter, this is their fourth designer I was reading. I remember the time of Riccardo Tisci,
which is past 10 years.
Yes, with Riccardo Tisci, who really was at the very beginning with Marco Gobbetti. They really made that great duo of management and designer that worked really well together. I remember that. And that's when Givenchy really started growing tremendously. And since they both left, I feel that brand doesn't have a direction. It's not about, and this is an amazing brand. And it feels when you go through in front of a store, my feeling is that the only thing they're doing is they're putting Givenchy logo on everything. And that's not sustainable. There's no creation. There's no idea. And that's where I'm saying that Balenciaga is very different because yes, you see the logo a lot, but they have a point of view and they push the envelope and they've created trends.
For sure. They're also pushing the envelope towards youth culture, as you alluded to, with product design, with emerging technology through the use of immersive verticals and beyond. But like creative directors, like established, some of the best in class designers are now going to fast retailers too. I think Stefano Pilati, who's arguably one of the best designers out there, is at Zara now. And I think Claire Waite Keller just recently moved over to Uniqlo. Like, does Uniqlo need someone at such a high level of talent? Is someone like Stefano Pilati even able to like really flex his design muscles in a platform, a fast fashion platform like Zara?
It's up to Zara to decide what will happen. But I think Zara, I look at Zara all the time. I mean, I think Zara is an unbelievable company. I mean, they've evolved tremendously. When you really look carefully at what they're doing, they've evolved tremendously. Their price point has gone a lot higher than it used to be. Their website is top notch. Their photography is top notch. They do a great job. So they want to go, and they said it, they want to go more upstream. Is that the beginning of it? Maybe for parts of the collection. I think if they manage to do that, it's really great for them and move more into contemporary. perhaps. Uniqlo has a history of doing that. I mean, Jill Sanders has been there for a long time, or was there. I don't think she works there.
Yeah.
I mean, she designs there anymore. Yeah. But J Plus, I mean, she was there for years. So they have an experience with that. And Uniqlo, which is one of my favorite brands, to be honest. I mean, I just think they're extraordinary because they bring
Japanese do things great. Yep.
Because they do bring great product at great pricing. So I'm back to what I said earlier. And I think it's going to be interesting. Look, they've collaborated for years with J.W. Anderson. They've done Ines. They've done a lot of collaboration like this. So it's nothing new for them. So I think maybe she's a replacement of Jill Sanders, but they've done it before. So I was not surprised. Is it a good choice? We'll see. So I'm not against that. I think, if you really want to be a good designer, you don't necessarily should be the designer just for a happy few. You should be able to, see your designs in many places. And that's one of the things that I appreciated with Sacha is one day he told me, he said, he's a designer, he's creative, he's very demanding, but at the same time, for him, success is when he sees his products in the street or on the walls of people.
So, it's interesting. I love your affinity to superior design. You've given us a ton of your time today. And when I finish each episode, we have a format where I start the sentence with the title of the show, Some Future Day, and I allow for my guest to finish my sentence. So I'd like to talk to you in this way about superior design, if you're okay with that.
Okay.
So in some future day, artificial intelligence will recalibrate the way designs are made in the luxury sector by
taking and always taking inputs from real people and real designs.
Beautiful. Nicolas, thank you so much for all of your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been great having you as my guest on Some Future Day.
Thank you very much, Marc. Always a pleasure to see you and to speak to you. And hopefully we can see each other soon in person.
I know your time is very important, so thank you so much for joining me today. For ongoing insight surrounding these important topics, you can join the conversation on my social media channels, including Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Marc Beckman. And to sign up for my newsletter on Substack, you can find me at marcbeckman.substack.com. To make sure you don't miss a show, be sure to subscribe to Some Future Day across all major platforms worldwide, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Special thanks to New York University for producing Some Future Day, and a big shout out to my producer extraordinaire, John Boomhofer, for being patient and always encouraging me to push through. Thanks a lot, John. Have a great day.